Alyssa pushed open the glass door of the gun store, the small bell above it chiming softly. The smell of oil, gunmetal, and leather filled the air. It was a place she'd been wanting to visit for months, the biggest and most respected firearms store in her town. Rows of polished rifles and pistols lined the walls like trophies. But the moment she stepped inside, the laughter began. A group of older men standing near the counter turned their heads, their smiles twisting into smirks. Alyssa looked younger than her age, barely 22, with a calm but serious face. Her light brown hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a gray hoodie and jeans. Nothing about her looked like someone who belonged in a place like this. One of the men nudged his friend and said quietly, "Lost your way, sweetheart? This isn't a toy store." The others chuckled under their breath. Alyssa heard it, but she didn't say a word. She had expected this reaction. It wasn't the first time someone had doubted her because of her age or her appearance. She walked straight to the counter with confidence. The man behind it, an older store clerk with a trimmed mustache and a badge that said Tom, looked up from his paperwork. He raised an eyebrow, scanning her from head to toe. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked in a tone that sounded polite but clearly doubtful. "Yes," Alyssa replied calmly. "I'm looking for the AR-15 models you have in stock, preferably the ones with modular rail systems and adjustable stocks." Tom blinked in surprise. He wasn't expecting that kind of specific request from someone who looked like a college freshman. Behind her, the men laughed again. One whispered loudly, "She must have read that off a YouTube comment section." Another added, "Maybe she wants to pose with it for Instagram." Alyssa turned slightly toward them, her voice firm but calm. "I'm not here for photos. I'm here to buy a rifle that performs well." Her tone was serious enough to quiet them, for a moment. But their smirks quickly returned. Tom sighed, obviously not taking her seriously. "You sure you know what you're asking for, miss? These aren't simple pieces of hardware. They're not something you just pick because they look cool." Alyssa didn't flinch. "I understand that," she said. "The AR-15 platform allows for better customization and easier recoil management. I've done my research." Tom crossed his arms, half amused and half skeptical. "Research, huh? Well, all right then. Let's see how much you actually know." He led her toward a display wall filled with rifles, most of them gleaming under the bright store lights. As they walked, the same group of men followed, pretending to browse but clearly there to watch the show. Alyssa pointed to a matte black rifle hanging near the center. "That one. Is that the M4E1 variant?" Tom's eyebrows shot up again. "You know that model? I built something similar at home," she replied casually. "I wanted to compare the weight and barrel length on this one." For a moment, Tom just stared at her. The others behind her went silent, not sure if she was bluffing or actually knew what she was talking about. She reached for the display piece as Tom handed it over carefully. Alyssa held it with practiced hands, firm but controlled, checking the sights and balance like someone who had done this many times before. Tom watched quietly now, his earlier sarcasm fading. "You handle that well," he said finally. Alyssa smiled slightly. "My dad taught me," she said softly. "He was an engineer, used to design parts for rifles before he passed away." The tone in her voice made even the men behind her stop whispering. For the first time since she entered, the laughter stopped completely. She placed the rifle back on the rack gently and turned toward Tom. "I'm interested in buying this model, but I'd like to know if you have the upgraded version with the enhanced trigger system." Tom hesitated, his attitude shifting from mockery to confusion. We might have one in the back," he said slowly. Alyssa nodded. "I'll wait." She walked toward the counter, her steps calm, her posture straight. She could still feel their eyes on her, but now the look wasn't mockery. It was curiosity. The doorbell chimed again as someone else entered the store, but Alyssa didn't look up. She was busy reviewing the specifications sheet on her phone, jotting down small notes. What she didn't know was that this moment, the quiet before something extraordinary, would soon change everything. For now, though, she stood there, a young woman surrounded by people who underestimated her. But behind her calm expression was someone far stronger than anyone realized. Someone with knowledge, skill, and a story that was about to silence every laugh in that room. The men behind her whispered again, but this time, their tone had changed. "She really knows her stuff," one murmured. Tom returned from the back room with the upgraded model in his hands, his earlier smirk replaced by respect. "You might actually know more than most of my customers," he admitted. Alyssa looked up, her eyes sharp yet kind. "Maybe," she said softly. "But people usually don't listen long enough to find out." No one laughed this time. The air in the store had shifted. And though Alyssa didn't know it yet, the person who had just walked in, the man in a sharp black suit, was about to reveal a truth that would make everyone in that store remember her forever. The laughter in the gun store hadn't stopped. Even after Alyssa had confidently asked for the AR-15 model, some of the men hanging around near the counter still whispered and snickered. They couldn't believe someone who looked so young could be serious about buying a weapon like that. To them, she was just a kid pretending to know what she was talking about. Tom, the store clerk, was still unsure how to handle the situation. He wasn't a bad man, but he had seen all kinds of people walk in. Most of them older, experienced, or military types. Alyssa didn't fit any of those boxes. Her calm voice and intelligent answers had already surprised him, but his pride wouldn't let him admit that easily. "Tell you what," he said with a half smile, leaning on the counter. "How about a little test? I like to make sure people actually know what they're buying." Alyssa didn't flinch. "Sure," she said. "Go ahead." The men behind her chuckled again. One of them said loudly, "Oh, this is going to be good." Another added, "She won't last 2 questions." Tom started his test, asking questions most new buyers couldn't answer. "All right then," he said. "What's the standard twist rate on most AR-15 barrels?" Without hesitation, Alyssa replied, 1 in 7 or 1 in 8, depending on the bullet weight and the manufacturer. Tom blinked. "Okay, fair enough." He tried another. "What's the main difference between a direct impingement system and a piston system?" "The piston system runs cleaner but adds a little weight," she said smoothly. "Direct impingement is lighter but dirtier over time. It's about maintenance preference." The men behind her stopped smiling. Tom's smirk started to fade. He scratched his chin, feeling slightly embarrassed but kept going. "All right, last one. If you were building one for accuracy, what kind of barrel would you choose?" Alyssa thought for a moment. "A stainless steel barrel, probably 18-inch with a match-grade twist rate. Heavier profile for stability." Silence filled the store. The men who had been mocking her were now just staring. Alyssa didn't look proud or smug. She just stood there, calm and confident, as if this was all normal to her. Tom forced a laugh, trying to hide his surprise. "Well, looks like you've done your homework." Alyssa smiled politely. "Not homework," she said softly. "Experience." That word made Tom pause. Experience? What kind of experience could a young girl like her have? But before he could ask, one of the older men at the back spoke up. "You really think you can handle that rifle? It's not like holding a hairdryer, sweetheart." The others laughed again, though this time the laughter felt weaker, less certain. Alyssa turned her head toward them. Her tone stayed calm. "You'd be surprised what I can handle." Her words hit differently. They weren't loud or angry, just steady and powerful. Even Tom felt it. He saw something in her eyes that told him she wasn't bluffing. Still, he decided to keep things light. "All right then," he said, placing the AR-15 on the counter in front of her. "Let's see how you hold it." Alyssa stepped forward, lifted the rifle carefully, and checked the chamber with perfect technique. Her stance was solid, professional, almost military-like. She looked through the sights, adjusted the grip, and held it close like it belonged to her. Tom crossed his arms, watching silently. The men behind her whispered again, but not out of mockery this time. One of them muttered, "She knows what she's doing." Alyssa lowered the rifle and placed it back gently on the counter. "Good balance," she said, "but the trigger pull feels heavier than I expected. Do you have one with an enhanced trigger system?" Tom nodded slowly, realizing she wasn't playing games. "I think we might," he said. While he went to the back room to check, Alyssa stood quietly by the counter. The other customers avoided eye contact, suddenly uncomfortable. A few minutes ago they were laughing. Now they weren't sure what to say. One of them, trying to recover from the awkward silence, spoke up again. "You really know about this stuff, huh?" Alyssa turned to him and smiled politely. "I should," she said. "My father taught me everything I know." Her voice softened slightly when she said that. The man nodded awkwardly, not knowing how to respond. Tom returned from the back, holding another rifle carefully. "This one's the enhanced model," he said. "Just came in last week. Lighter trigger, smoother pull." Alyssa examined it closely, her eyes sharp but focused. She handled it with the same confident precision as before. Every movement showed she wasn't just pretending. She understood every inch of the weapon. Tom finally sighed. "I'll admit, I didn't expect this," he said honestly. "You're not like most customers." "I get that a lot," she said softly. Tom chuckled, scratching his neck. "Yeah, I bet you do. You sure you don't work for someone in the industry?" Before she could reply, the doorbell above the entrance chimed again. Everyone turned their heads as a tall man in a dark suit walked in. His presence was strong, calm, but commanding. The employees immediately straightened up. Alyssa noticed him but didn't react. She didn't need to. Tom, however, froze for a moment. "Is that?" he whispered to one of the other clerks. The man nodded nervously. "That's Richard Cole, the CEO." The entire atmosphere in the store changed instantly. Customers who had been laughing a few minutes ago suddenly grew quiet. The employees scrambled to look busy. Alyssa simply stood there, still holding the rifle gently in her hands. She didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything was about to change. The same people who doubted her were about to find out who she really was, and why even the CEO knew her name. For now, though, she stood calm and composed, the faintest hint of confidence in her eyes. The whispers had stopped. The laughter had died. And all that remained was curiosity, and a growing sense that they had seriously underestimated the young woman standing before them. The atmosphere inside the gun store had completely changed. What started as laughter and mockery was now filled with uneasy silence. The men who had been joking moments ago were now pretending to look at rifles, avoiding Alyssa's eyes. Even Tom, the clerk who had tested her knowledge, looked confused. He had expected to prove that she didn't belong here, but instead, she had answered every technical question with confidence. Alyssa stood by the counter, quietly checking her notes on her phone. Her calmness made her seem even more mysterious. The others couldn't figure her out. Who was this young woman who spoke like an expert and handled firearms like she'd done it for years? Just then, the sound of the doorbell broke the silence. A tall man in a dark gray suit entered the store. His steps were steady and confident. He didn't look like an average customer, more like someone important. The moment the employees saw him, they straightened up. The store manager, who had been in the back, came rushing forward. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cole," he said nervously. The name made a few customers turn their heads. Richard Cole. That name was well known in the firearm industry. He was the CEO of Cole Defense Systems, one of the top manufacturers of high-end rifles, the very same brand the store sold. His visit was unexpected, and everyone suddenly became alert. Alyssa glanced up, her expression calm but curious. She didn't say anything, just quietly observed. Richard Cole began inspecting the store, greeting a few staff members and looking over the display racks. His presence demanded respect, yet he carried himself with warmth. Meanwhile, Tom leaned over to whisper to another employee. "Why didn't anyone tell us he was coming today?" The other man whispered back, "He likes surprise visits. Says it keeps everyone honest." Richard continued walking through the store, occasionally nodding at customers. When his eyes finally landed on Alyssa, something changed in his expression. His serious face softened into a smile. Not a polite one, but the kind of smile that comes from recognition. He walked straight toward her. Everyone else watched, confused. Why was the CEO walking up to the young woman who had just been mocked a few minutes ago? Alyssa looked up from the counter, meeting his gaze. "Mr. Cole?" She greeted him calmly, a hint of respect in her voice. Richard nodded warmly. "Miss Daniels," he said. "I didn't expect to see you here today." Tom blinked in surprise. "Miss Daniels?" He turned to the others, whispering, "He knows her." Alyssa smiled faintly. "Just checking out the new models," she said. "I wanted to compare some features before our next design review." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Design review? What did that mean?" The CEO chuckled softly. "You never stop working, do you?" he said. "Your father would have been proud of that." The room went completely silent. Everyone was watching. Alyssa's calm face softened slightly. "I'm just trying to live up to his standards," she said quietly. The CEO nodded with deep respect. "You already have," he said. Then, turning toward the stunned employees and customers, he added, "For those who don't know, this young woman is Alyssa Daniels, one of our lead design engineers. She's been helping develop our newest rifle system, the same model you're selling here." The silence grew heavier. You could almost hear the sound of hearts sinking as realization spread. The same people who had laughed at her earlier now looked completely speechless. Tom felt his face grow hot. I didn't know," he started to say, but his voice faded away. Richard gave a small, friendly smile. "It's all right," he said. "Most people don't realize how much young talent drives this industry. Alyssa here is one of the best. She worked directly with her father, the late Henry Daniels, who was our chief engineer for over a decade. She's continuing his legacy." Alyssa looked down for a moment, her eyes soft with emotion. Her father's name still carried weight in the industry. Everyone in the store had heard of him, the man who helped design some of the most reliable rifles ever made. None of them had any idea that this quiet young woman was his daughter. One of the older men who had laughed at her earlier cleared his throat awkwardly. I think I read about her father in a magazine once," he muttered to no one in particular. Richard nodded. "You probably did," he said kindly. Then, turning back to Alyssa, he added, "How's the prototype coming along?" "We're testing the new trigger assembly," Alyssa replied. "The results are better than expected. Lighter pull, smoother action. I think we're close to finalizing it." "That's good to hear," Richard said with a proud smile. "Keep me updated. You have an excellent eye for detail, just like your father." The employees stood frozen, unsure what to do. The same man they feared, their CEO, was speaking to this young woman with complete respect, as if she were his equal. Tom finally stepped forward, his voice shaky. "Miss Daniels, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to." Alyssa stopped him gently. "It's okay," she said with a small smile. "You didn't know." Her kindness made Tom feel even worse. "Still," he said, lowering his eyes, "I shouldn't have assumed. You clearly know more about these rifles than I ever will." Alyssa nodded kindly. "Thank you," she said. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come by the office next week," he said. "We'll finalize the presentation for the new design." "I will," she said. As Richard walked away, the store fell completely silent again. Everyone was staring at Alyssa with a mix of shock and admiration. Just a few minutes ago, they thought she was some inexperienced girl who didn't belong there. Now, they realized she was one of the brilliant minds shaping the very weapons they sold. When she turned to leave, people stepped aside, giving her space with quiet respect. No one laughed this time. No one dared to say a word. As the doorbell chimed behind her and she walked out into the bright afternoon light, Tom exhaled deeply. "I'll never judge someone by their looks again," he muttered. And deep down, everyone in that store knew they had just witnessed something unforgettable. A moment that turned embarrassment into admiration, and a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. The door to the gun store opened, and everyone turned their heads at once. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, his shoes clicking lightly against the tiled floor. He looked out of place among the racks of rifles and shelves of ammunition, but the confidence in his walk told everyone he belonged there. His expression was calm, yet his presence instantly demanded respect. It was as if the entire room shifted the moment he entered. Tom, the store clerk, froze behind the counter. The store manager, who had just come out from the back room, quickly adjusted his tie and whispered nervously, "Oh no, that's him." Alyssa looked up from where she was standing, her eyes quietly following the man. She didn't seem nervous, only curious. The others, however, looked anxious. The man in the suit wasn't just anyone. He was Richard Cole, the CEO of Cole Defense Systems, one of the largest gun manufacturing companies in the country. His company produced many of the firearms sold in this very store. The customers who had been laughing earlier now stood still, unsure of what to do. The employees straightened their posture immediately. Tom whispered to his coworker, "Why is he here today? We didn't get any notice." His coworker whispered back, "He does surprise inspections sometimes. Wants to see how his products are being handled." Richard Cole walked slowly down the aisle, observing the displays, the arrangement, and the staff's behavior. His sharp eyes missed nothing. The air inside the store grew heavier. Even the men who had been making jokes earlier were now pretending to study gun catalogs, hoping they wouldn't be noticed. But Richard's attention wasn't on them. His gaze stopped when he noticed Alyssa standing near the counter, calmly looking at a rifle. Something about her caught his attention immediately. He tilted his head slightly, his expression changing from professional seriousness to familiarity. He walked straight toward her. The employees exchanged confused glances. Why was the CEO approaching the young woman everyone had just mocked? Alyssa turned as he stopped in front of her. A faint, polite smile appeared on her face. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice calm and respectful. Tom blinked. "Mr. Cole?" She knew him? Richard smiled warmly. "Miss Daniels," he said, "I didn't expect to see you here today. Are you testing our new models again?" The entire store went silent. You could hear the soft hum of the ceiling fan as every pair of eyes turned toward them. Alyssa smiled politely. "Yes, sir. I was just comparing a few features. Wanted to see how this latest design performs in real-world handling." Richard nodded approvingly. "Good. You always were thorough." Tom felt his stomach drop. His mind raced with confusion. Miss Daniels? Testing models? What was happening? The CEO looked around and noticed the uncomfortable silence. "I assume everyone here knows who this young lady is?" he asked casually. No one answered. They all stood frozen, their faces pale. Richard chuckled softly. "Didn't think so," he said. "Allow me to introduce her properly." He placed a gentle hand on Alyssa's shoulder and said, "This is Alyssa Daniels, one of the lead design engineers at Cole Defense Systems. She's the one helping us develop the new precision rifle that's about to hit the market." The entire store went completely silent. Tom's mouth fell open slightly. One of the older customers, who had mocked her earlier, looked down at the floor in shame. The reality of the moment sank in like a heavy weight. The young girl they had laughed at wasn't just some random customer. She was one of the top minds behind the very weapons they admired. Alyssa stood quietly, not proud or boastful, just calm. Her confidence now made perfect sense. She had been around these machines her entire life. She understood their mechanics better than most people in that room. Richard continued, "Alyssa's father, the late Henry Daniels, was our chief engineer for more than 10 years. He helped design our best-selling rifle model. She's continuing his legacy and doing a remarkable job." The mention of her father brought a quiet sadness to her eyes, but also pride. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "He taught me everything I know." Richard nodded. "And you've taken his knowledge even further. I've seen your work. It's exceptional." The people who had laughed earlier couldn't even look her in the eye. Tom felt embarrassed to his core. His earlier words, the teasing, the condescending tone, now replayed in his mind, making him wish he could take them all back. Alyssa noticed his discomfort but said nothing. She wasn't here to humiliate anyone. Richard turned to the employees. "I like to visit stores like this to see how our products are presented," he said. "But it's not often I find one of our own engineers testing them in person. He smiled at Alyssa again. It's good to see you still have that same hands-on passion your father had. Thank you, Mr. Cole, she replied with a gentle smile. I believe you understand things better when you experience them yourself. Exactly, he said proudly. That's what makes you one of the best. Everyone in the store felt a strange mix of awe and regret. They realized how wrong their assumptions had been. A few of the men who had made jokes earlier exchanged uneasy glances. None of them dared to speak. Tom finally gathered the courage to say something. Miss Daniels, I'm really sorry for earlier. I shouldn't have questioned your knowledge. Alyssa looked at him kindly. It's okay, she said softly. You didn't know. Her calmness only made Tom feel more ashamed. He nodded silently, realizing she was more mature than anyone else in that room. Richard looked around one last time before speaking. Well, I think we can all agree on one thing, he said with a slight smile. Never underestimate someone because of how young they look. Talent doesn't come with age. It comes with passion. Those words hit everyone hard. Even the customers nodded quietly. Alyssa placed the rifle she had been holding back on the counter and turned to Richard. I should get going, she said politely. I'll send you the updated reports this week. I'll be waiting, he said. Keep up the great work. As she walked out of the store, the same bell above the door chimed again. This time, no one laughed, no one whispered. Everyone just watched her leave, their eyes filled with respect. Richard turned to the employees and said quietly, You all met one of the best engineers in the business today. Remember her name. You'll be seeing it on our next big release. And as he left the store, the silence lingered. A heavy reminder of how quickly mockery can turn to admiration when the truth is finally revealed. The store was completely silent after the CEO, Richard Cole, introduced Alyssa to everyone. A few minutes ago, people had laughed at her, whispered behind her back, and treated her like a child who didn't belong. Now they stood frozen, staring at her with wide eyes. The same young woman they mocked was actually one of the lead engineers for Cole Defense Systems, the company that made most of the rifles in this store. Alyssa could feel the heavy change in the air, but she stayed calm. She wasn't the type to rub it in or enjoy anyone's embarrassment. She simply nodded respectfully at Mr. Cole, as if this whole situation didn't bother her. But inside, a quiet pride bloomed. She had faced judgment and disrespect many times before, yet every time, she chose to let her work speak for her. Mr. Cole smiled warmly and turned to her. Miss Daniels, he said, how's your father's project coming along? The one you were finishing last month. Every head in the room turned toward her again. Her father's project? Someone whispered. Alyssa's expression softened. It's going well, she replied. We finished the new prototype last week. It passed all the safety and performance tests. Mr. Cole's face lit up. That's excellent news. Your father would be proud to see how far you've taken his work. The mention of her father made the room fall even quieter. Most people in the gun industry had heard the name Henry Daniels. He had been a respected engineer, known for his intelligence and creativity. He had worked at Cole Defense Systems for years before passing away in an accident 2 years ago. His daughter, Alyssa, had quietly taken over his unfinished designs, something few people even knew. Tom, the store clerk, felt a heavy lump in his throat. He remembered how he had laughed at her earlier, thinking she was just a clueless girl. Now, hearing her talk about designing and testing prototypes, he realized how wrong he had been. Mr. Cole placed a hand on Alyssa's shoulder in a proud, fatherly way. You've done something remarkable, he said. Your father built the foundation, but you've turned his vision into something greater. I saw the test results myself. Your modifications improved the accuracy by almost 15%. That's not something even our senior engineers managed to achieve. Everyone listened in silence. No one could believe what they were hearing. The young woman they had underestimated was behind one of the company's most advanced rifles. Alyssa smiled modestly. Thank you, sir. I just wanted to make him proud. Everything I know, I learned from him. Mr. Cole nodded thoughtfully. He always spoke about you, he said. He used to tell us that one day his daughter would surpass him. I guess he was right. Those words hit Alyssa hard. For a brief moment, her calm expression wavered, and her eyes glistened. She blinked it away quickly, smiling softly. He always believed in me, she whispered. The people around her looked down, ashamed. They realized they had made fun of someone who had walked through unimaginable challenges. Someone who had lost her father and still carried his legacy forward with strength and grace. Tom cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Daniels, I'm so sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to be rude earlier. Alyssa turned toward him gently. It's okay, she said with a kind smile. You didn't know who I was. It happens more often than you think. Her calmness and humility only deepened the respect in the room. The man who had mocked her earlier, the one who made the Instagram joke, finally spoke up too. I feel terrible, he said, scratching his head. You handled all of that way better than I would have. Alyssa gave a small laugh. I've learned that sometimes silence says more than arguments, she replied. Mr. Cole looked around the store, reading everyone's expressions. Let this be a reminder, he said in a firm but calm voice. You never know who's standing in front of you. Don't judge someone by their age or appearance. Respect comes from knowledge, not looks. Everyone nodded quietly. Even the customers who hadn't said anything earlier felt guilty for assuming Alyssa didn't belong. Mr. Cole turned back to Alyssa, his tone softening again. You know, he said, your father once told me that he was building those designs for you, not just for the company. He wanted you to finish them when the time was right. And now you have. Alyssa's voice was gentle. He always wanted me to keep going, she said. He said our work wasn't just about guns. It was about precision, discipline, and responsibility. That's what I try to remember every day. The respect in the room was almost visible now. Every person there could feel the weight of her words. Tom finally smiled, though still a little embarrassed. Miss Daniels, he said, if there's anything we can do for you, anything at all, please just ask. Alyssa nodded gratefully. Thank you, Tom. Just keep doing what you do, and maybe give people a little more credit when they walk in. That made a few people smile awkwardly. The tension in the air eased just a bit. Mr. Cole chuckled. That's a fair request, he said. I think we've all learned something important today. He turned to leave but paused. Alyssa, you're presenting the new prototype next month, right? Yes, sir, she replied confidently. I'll have the final report ready. Good, he said with a proud smile. You're doing incredible work. Keep making your father, and this company, proud. I will, she said simply. As he walked toward the exit, the employees and customers moved aside respectfully. Alyssa followed a few steps behind, her footsteps quiet but steady. When the door opened, a warm breeze swept in from outside, and the little bell above the door rang softly again. The same sound that had marked her arrival earlier, but now it carried a completely different meaning. The girl who had been mocked as too young had just proven that knowledge, patience, and strength didn't depend on age or appearance. Everyone in that store would remember that moment, not just as a lesson in humility, but as the day they met a young woman carrying her father's dream into the future with pride. When Alyssa left the gun store that day, her heart was full of emotions she could hardly describe. Relief, pride, and a little bit of sadness mixed together. The look on everyone's faces when they discovered who she really was would stay in her memory for a long time. But she didn't hold any anger toward them. In fact, she understood why they reacted that way. People often judged what they didn't understand. What mattered to her was that she had proven herself without needing to shout, argue, or demand respect. Her work and her calm confidence had done it for her. The sun was starting to set as she walked toward her car. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold, and for a moment, she paused to take it in. Her father used to love sunsets like this. End of a day doesn't mean failure, he used to say. It just means you get another chance tomorrow. Thinking of those words made her smile. She could almost hear his voice in her mind, calm and encouraging, reminding her that she was on the right path. As she drove away, she thought about the next step, the prototype presentation that Mr. Cole had mentioned. It wasn't just any project. This was the one her father had started before his accident. The same design he had spent years working on. After he passed, Alyssa had promised herself she would finish it, no matter how hard it got. And it hadn't been easy. Many nights, she stayed awake until sunrise, reading his old notes, trying to understand his handwriting and his equations. Sometimes, she cried out of frustration because something didn't make sense. But she never gave up. Now, that project was complete, and soon the whole company, maybe even the military, would see it. That thought both excited and scared her. She knew people would question her age again. They always did. But this time, she would be ready. A few days later, Alyssa arrived at the Cole Defense Systems headquarters, a massive building made of glass and steel. The moment she stepped inside, she could feel the energy of the place. Engineers and technicians were walking around with blueprints, models, and tools. Everyone was busy creating something new. Alyssa had been here many times before, but this visit felt different. This time, she wasn't just an assistant or a trainee. She was the lead on a project that could change everything. As she entered the lab, her friend Jason waved at her from across the room. He had been her partner on the project, helping her with testing and field simulations. "You ready for the big day?" he asked with a grin. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, smiling. Jason chuckled. "You should have seen the emails this morning. Everyone's talking about the new prototype. No one can believe it was designed by someone under 30. Alyssa laughed softly. "Let them be surprised again. I'm getting used to it." They spent the next few hours checking every part of the new rifle. It was lighter, more accurate, and easier to handle than anything else on the market. But Alyssa's favorite part wasn't its power, it was its safety system. She had designed a new locking mechanism that could prevent accidents, something her father had always dreamed of perfecting. It made her proud to know that the weapon wasn't just strong but also responsible. Later that afternoon, Mr. Cole entered the lab. He looked around with a satisfied smile. "So this is it," he said, resting his eyes on Alyssa. "Your father would have been amazed." "Thank you, sir," Alyssa replied. "I just wanted to finish what he started, and make it even safer." Mr. Cole nodded approvingly. "You've done more than that. You've built something that honors him, and improves what we stand for as a company. Tomorrow's demonstration will prove that." Hearing that made Alyssa's heart race. Tomorrow. The thought of standing in front of investors, military officials, and engineers made her nervous. But she also felt determined. That night she barely slept. She sat by her window, looking at the moonlight reflecting on her father's old photo. He was standing beside a prototype rifle, smiling proudly. She whispered softly, "I hope I'm making you proud, Dad." When morning came, Alyssa dressed in her neat uniform and arrived early at the testing range. The large outdoor area was already being prepared. People were setting up cameras, test targets, and safety barriers. The air buzzed with anticipation. When Mr. Cole arrived, he introduced Alyssa to the gathered crowd. Many of them didn't recognize her. She could hear a few whispers, some people still doubting her ability because of her age. But she didn't let that shake her confidence. "This is Alyssa Daniels," Mr. Cole announced, "the lead designer of the new precision prototype you're about to see." Gasps and murmurs followed. Alyssa took a deep breath and stepped forward. She explained how her father had started this design years ago, and how she had finished it by combining his ideas with modern technology. Her voice was calm but passionate. Every word carried the weight of her journey. Finally, it was time for the demonstration. Alyssa picked up the rifle and adjusted the sights. The crowd watched in silence as she took aim at the distant targets. Her hands were steady, her breathing slow. When she pulled the trigger, the shot rang out, clean and precise. The bullet hit dead center. She fired again. And again. Each shot landed perfectly. Applause erupted. Even the most skeptical engineers couldn't hide their amazement. Mr. Cole clapped the loudest, his eyes shining with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is what happens when talent, hard work, and passion come together. No matter the age or gender." Alyssa lowered the rifle and smiled, the tension leaving her shoulders. She had done it. Not just for herself but for her father. That evening, as the sun set once again, she stood alone on the field, looking at the orange sky. The same colors she had seen after leaving the gun store. Only now, she felt different. Stronger, freer, and ready for whatever came next. She knew this was only the beginning of her story, and this time no one would ever laugh at her for being young again. The next morning, Alyssa woke up to a flood of messages on her phone. Her presentation had gone viral overnight. Someone from the audience had recorded her demonstration and shared it online with the caption, "The young engineer who silenced an entire industry." The video had spread quickly. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and countless people praising her talent and humility. But more than that, her story was inspiring others. Young engineers, women in male-dominated fields, and even retired veterans were commenting about how her dedication reminded them of why they started chasing their own dreams. Alyssa stared at the screen, her heart pounding with disbelief. Felt surreal. She never expected any fame. All she ever wanted was to make her father proud and prove herself through her work. She scrolled through the messages, smiling softly at the kind words people had written. But one message caught her attention. It was from a woman named Clara, who said, "My daughter wants to be an engineer too, but people keep telling her it's not for girls. After watching you, she told me she's not giving up." That message brought tears to Alyssa's eyes. She had faced the same kind of discouragement once. People telling her she was too young, too inexperienced, or in the wrong field. And now, because she had refused to give up, someone else was finding courage too. That realization made her more determined than ever. Later that day, Alyssa received a call from Mr. Cole. His tone was filled with excitement. "Alyssa," he said, "I hope you're ready for some good news. The board loved your prototype. They want to move it into production next month." Alyssa gasped. "Really? That soon?" "Yes," he replied. "And that's not all. They want you to lead the production team. You've earned it." Her eyes widened in surprise. Leading a production team meant more responsibility, more challenges, and more respect. It was a position that usually took years to achieve. "Thank you, sir," she said sincerely. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Mr. Cole said. "You've already made us proud. And I think your father would be too." That last line hit her heart like a soft whisper. For a moment, she was speechless. "Thank you," she managed to say. "That means everything to me." When she hung up, Alyssa took a deep breath. This was the moment she had worked so hard for. The chance to turn her father's unfinished dream into something real. But she also knew the pressure would be enormous. Still, she wasn't afraid. Every time she faced doubt or difficulty, she reminded herself of that day at the gun store, when people had laughed at her, and how she had stayed calm, letting her actions speak louder than words. That memory had become her secret strength. Over the next few weeks, Alyssa poured herself into her work. She led the production meetings, discussed materials, reviewed safety protocols, and made sure every small detail matched her father's vision. Her team respected her not because of her title, but because of how she treated them with kindness and fairness. She listened to every suggestion, helped solve problems, and made sure no one felt overlooked. Jason, her friend and teammate, often teased her lightly. "You know," he said one day, "you're turning into a legend around here." Alyssa laughed. "A legend who barely gets any sleep," she joked. But deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. For so long, she had been fighting to be seen, to prove that she belonged. Now she didn't need to fight anymore. She had earned her place. One afternoon, Mr. Cole visited the workshop to check on the progress. He watched as Alyssa demonstrated the assembly process to new team members. "You've created something amazing here," he said afterward. "This design will set new standards in the industry." "Thank you," Alyssa replied. "It's not just my work, though. It's a team effort, and a tribute to my dad." Mr. Cole nodded. "He would have been proud to see you leading with the same passion he had." Alyssa smiled quietly. "I think he's watching somehow," she said. When production began, the new rifle quickly gained attention. Experts admired its precision and safety features. Reporters wanted interviews, and defense magazines featured her story with headlines like, "The young genius who revolutionized firearm safety." Even people who had once doubted her were now praising her innovation. But Alyssa never let the fame change her. Whenever someone asked how she felt about all the success, she always gave the same answer: "I'm just continuing what my father started." One evening, after a long day at work, Alyssa visited her father's grave. The air was calm, and the sunset painted the sky with soft pink and orange shades, the same colors he used to love. She placed a small metal piece from the prototype beside his headstone and whispered, "We did it, Dad. It's finally complete." A gentle wind passed through the trees, almost like a silent response. She smiled through her tears. "You were right," she said softly. "Age doesn't matter. What matters is effort, respect, and heart." On her way back home, she thought about everything that had happened. The laughter, the humiliation, the doubts, the hard nights of work, and finally, the victory. Every challenge had shaped her into the woman she was now. The next morning, she received another letter from Clara, the woman whose daughter had been inspired by her story. This time, the letter included a photo of the little girl standing beside a science fair project titled Future Engineer. The message below said, "She wanted you to know that she won first place. Thank you for inspiring her." Alyssa smiled as tears filled her eyes again. That moment made her realize that her journey wasn't just about creating weapons or proving herself in a company. It was about showing others that strength and intelligence know no boundaries. She looked out her window at the rising sun and whispered, "This is just the beginning." And deep inside, she knew it was true. Her story had started with people mocking her for being young at a gun store. But now, her name had become a symbol of perseverance, courage, and quiet strength. A reminder that even when the world underestimates you, the best way to answer is not through anger, but through excellence. Months passed, and Alyssa's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Her story had reached far beyond the walls of the gun store and the company. News channels, magazines, and social media platforms were still talking about her. She had become an example of resilience, someone who proved that age and gender didn't define ability. But for Alyssa, fame wasn't the goal. She wanted her work to mean something, to continue her father's legacy, and to inspire others to believe in themselves. Every morning, she still followed the same routine: early coffee, quiet reflection, and a few minutes looking at her father's photograph before heading to work. But now, she wasn't just another engineer walking into the building. People greeted her with respect and genuine admiration. Even senior engineers who had once doubted her now asked for her input. She had earned her place not through pride, but through perseverance and humility. One afternoon, Alyssa was called into Mr. Cole's office. He stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline, and turned toward her with a thoughtful smile. "Alyssa," he began, "I wanted to tell you something personally before the board announces it tomorrow." She raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's going on?" He walked closer and handed her a folder. Inside were official documents, stamped and signed. Alyssa's heart skipped a beat as she read the title, Director of Innovation, Cole Defense Systems. She looked up at him, speechless. "Sir, are you serious?" Mr. Cole chuckled softly. "You've earned it, Alyssa. You didn't just finish your father's work. You've built your own legacy. The board unanimously voted to give you this position. You'll lead all future research and design projects." Alyssa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "Just keep doing what you're doing," he said warmly. "You've proven that leadership isn't about experience on paper. It's about integrity, vision, and heart. Your father would be incredibly proud." Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the folder. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me even when others didn't." Mr. Cole smiled. "You earned that belief yourself." That night, when Alyssa returned home, she couldn't stop smiling. She placed the new folder beside her father's old blueprints and whispered, "We did it, Dad." Together. For a moment, she imagined his voice saying, "I knew you could, kiddo." It brought tears to her eyes, but they were tears of peace and fulfillment. The next day, the company held a formal announcement. Cameras flashed, employees clapped, and Mr. Cole introduced Alyssa as the new director of innovation. As she stepped up to the podium, she looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some new. She wasn't nervous. She felt strong, calm, and grateful. "Thank you," she began. "When I first started here, I was just a young woman trying to finish my father's work. I made mistakes, I doubted myself, and I faced people who didn't believe I belonged. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered why I started. My father taught me that real strength isn't about how loud you are. It's about how steady you stay when the world tries to shake you." The room was completely silent. Everyone listened intently. "He believed in hard work, in honesty, and in respect, values that I try to live by every day. I didn't come here to prove anyone wrong. I came to prove that passion, dedication, and love for your craft can overcome anything. So, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: don't let anyone decide your worth. You already know who you are. Just show them through your actions." Applause filled the hall. People stood to their feet, cheering. Even the ones who once doubted her were now moved to tears. Alyssa smiled humbly and stepped down from the stage, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. After the ceremony, Tom, the clerk from the gun store, approached her. She hadn't seen him since that unforgettable day. He looked nervous, holding a small box in his hands. "Miss Daniels," he said awkwardly. "I don't know if you remember me." Alyssa smiled kindly. "Of course I remember you, Tom. You were there the day everything changed." He nodded, embarrassed. "I've wanted to apologize again, properly this time. You taught me something important that day. I was quick to judge you without knowing who you were. Since then, I've tried to treat everyone with more respect." Alyssa's eyes softened. "That means a lot, Tom. I'm glad something good came out of that moment." He handed her the box. "This is just a small gift from our team. We wanted you to have it." When she opened it, she saw a small, engraved silver keychain shaped like a bullet. On it were the words, "Respect isn't given, it's earned." Alyssa smiled warmly and said, "Thank you, Tom. This means more than you know." As Tom left, Mr. Cole walked up beside her. "You've come a long way from that day in the store," he said with a proud grin. Alyssa nodded, looking at the little keychain in her hand. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That day taught me something too, that sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that prepare us for greatness." Over time, Alyssa's story continued to inspire people all over the world. Universities invited her to speak to young engineers. Defense companies began adopting her safety designs. And every time she spoke, she told her story. Not to boast, but to remind others that belief and kindness go a long way. One evening, she visited her father's old workshop. The tools were still neatly arranged, the notebooks still lined on the table. She sat down, touched one of his old sketches, and whispered, "We did it, Dad. They laughed once, but now they understand." She turned off the lights and stepped outside. The sky was painted with the same orange and purple colors her father loved. She looked up, smiled, and said softly, "I'll keep going, for both of us." As the wind brushed past her hair, Alyssa walked away with calm confidence. She wasn't just her father's daughter anymore. She was a leader, an innovator, and a symbol of hope for everyone who had ever been underestimated. The girl who was once mocked for being young at a gun store had become the woman who changed the industry, not through anger or revenge, but through grace, courage, and unshakable determination. Her journey had come full circle, but in her heart, Alyssa knew one thing for sure: this was not the end. It was just the beginning of something even greater.